Hey everyone, in today's video we are going to paint some light and shadows. I'm not sure if I should call this video a tutorial. This video is more like oh hey, look at all the mistakes I've made type of video. So it's just me messing around basically. Let me show you a close-up of the sketches to help you decide whether or not you should continue watching this. So I have painted the 4 sketches, each one with a limited color palette, except for the top left, which was painted with water-soluble graphite. So these are the bottom 2. So these are the ink sketches I have prepared using the reference photo, which you can download from the video description. This is a black and white photo. So later on when we are painting with watercolor, we need to recreate the contrast, the light and shadow using watercolor. For the first sketch, I just want to paint a very light wash of graphite over all the areas that are not supposed to be white. So let's just paint over this. This is art graph. Oops, the water actually flowed down. I'm just going to clip this tissue here at the bottom so that the water will not flow down to the next sketch. You can use tonal studies to identify problematic areas before you paint your sketch with watercolor. So doing tonal studies like this is actually quite useful, very helpful. So this is just a quick wash, very pale wash of graphite. And this should be it. For the next sketch, I'll be painting with this limited color palette. We have Hansa Yellow, Transparent Pyro Orange, if I remember correctly, and Cobalt Blue Deep, one of my favorite blue colors. So I'm going to mix the colors on paper. I'm going to do basically the same thing here, except use colors this time. I'm going to start with a very light wash of yellow, red, and blue. You know what? I'm going to make this building orange. I need to clip paper at the bottom as well. I just used too much water. I'm going to use a lot of water just to paint this wash here. Maybe some yellow here perhaps. Alright, so this should do it. Next, I'll be using the 3-color art graph set. Let's make this building here orange as well. Seems like my color is not that clean. Okay, this color seems to be kinda strong. So let me just add more water. And for this sketch, we have Hansa Yellow Medium, French Ultramarine, and a Rose Madder. So let me use Hansa Yellow and Rose Madder for the building here first. You know what, let me just paint over the whole thing here. Okay, so this is the 4th sketch. So this is what we have so far. It looks alright. So far, so good. So this is now dry. Let's paint the second layer. For the second layer, I'm going to paint all the mid-tones. I'm going to reserve the last layer for the strong shadows, the cast shadows, the very obvious cast shadows. Okay, let's leave this as it is. When you are painting with a limited color palette, there is not much to think about because there are only 3 colors. So here, I think for this sketch, maybe let's just start painting with the shadow shape, like the very strong cast shadow shape. So for this, I will need to mix a lot of paint, and this small mixing well is not big enough. Alright, so I have just mixed a lot of paint. Let me test it in this small area first. This looks alright. I will want to add more cobalt blue dip. So let's make this dark, like really dark. And of course here, this shadow shape is actually kind of dark. Half of the door is actually lit by light. You may notice I did not draw a lot of details for the sketches. That's because I just want to focus on painting, so I don't waste too much time sketching. Each sketch probably took me around 5 minutes to draw. So if I actually mess up my shadows, my painting process, I wouldn't have wasted so much time with the inking or sketching process. I have a feeling that this may not be dark enough because when it dries, it's going to dry lighter, so I may actually need to make this darker. So let me see if it's still wet. Let me just go in a second time with a darker wash. I should have done this the first time round, but I'm not too sure. Depending on the paper you're using, you may actually really mess up the wash if you paint over a second time. Okay, I think it's darker. It looks alright. Hopefully when it dries, it looks better. Next, we have the sketch painted with the art craft color. So this time, let's have the shadows mixed on the paper. This seems kind of blue. Let's have some red added. Looks not bad. So let's paint the shadow shapes with red and blue. Let's go up at an angle here. And going up here, coming down, going to the right side. And lastly, let's work on this. So this was painted with Hansa Yellow, Rose Madder, and Ultramarine. With Ultramarine and Rose Madder, you can get a purple. So let's see what will happen if we paint this side purple. When you mix your own shadows using watercolor, the wash is going to look, the color is going to look more pleasing compared to just painting it with black. So this is what I have so far. So out of the 4, the contrast for this 2 is not that obvious. If you take a look at the reference photo, you can see this whole area here, it's almost black. but for my sketch here, it's just very white, mid value, light value. And this one is slightly darker than this, but the contrast is also not there. We don't have very strong blacks or very bold contrast. So let me paint over this with the third layer of graphite. All right, let's see what's gonna happen. So now we have contrast between this shadow side of the wall versus this side and this side here. Let me use this brush to paint some horizontal lines to represent the steps. I'm sorry if this video is confusing because I'm working on all the 4 sketches at the same time. So here I'm painting or making some of the areas darker. This is cobalt blue with the transparent pyro orange. When you are painting with a limited color palette, you can learn a lot about the colors you are using because not all colors will work together nicely. For example, if you want to paint, if you want to mix a purple, you can't do it with phthalo blue and a warm red. Right, last sketch. Maybe I can make this darker to separate this from this. Right, so here's a closer look at the sketches. I like the graphite sketch. I like the texture of the graphite on this cold press paper. It looks really nice, and I like the shadow shape. I am actually quite glad I did not add in an additional wash for these darker areas. I think this sketch works as it is. Perhaps it could be more detailed if I painted the shapes there. This sketch looks alright, I guess. I like the cobalt blue deep. I like the granulation. Cobalt blue deep has more granulation compared to French ultramarine. I guess this sketch looks alright. These are the last 2 sketches. I don't particularly like the art graph set. I find the colors to be not as vibrant compared to watercolor tube paints. But I mean, the colors, they work alright, just not as vibrant compared to other brands. This is kind of nice as well. More specifically, I mean, the color of the shadow is kind of nice. We have this purple shadow. This is purple because this is French ultramarine and rose madder. Cobalt blue deep and French ultramarine or ultramarine can look kind of similar. Here the wash is less purple because the red is a warm red, transparent pyro orange. And here the wash is more purple because the red is a cool red. This is quite a fun exercise for me. So if you want to practice, my suggestion is not to spend so much time on the ink lines, because if you mess up the painting, you wouldn't have wasted that much time with the drawing. Definitely stick with a limited color palette, because it's going to make the color mixing process so much easier. When you have only 3 colors, you can only use those 3 colors.